I'd like to open the meeting with the prayer from the Reverend Te Aotearoa, who's the Maori chaplain at the Otago University and the Otago Polytechnic. Welcome.
Mōrena koutou. It's a privilege to be here and to see the importance of karakia. And I would like to explain my karakia this morning and praying about how I would open our hui this morning is just to say te inoi a te araki, which is the prayer that Jesus says to pray. And it's kind of the prayer that everyone prays throughout the world. So, ka inoi tātou. E tō mātou mātui te rangi kia tapu tō ingoa. Heavenly Father, we give thanks to you who live high above us in the sense that your greatness is greater than ours, and that humbles us as humans on this planet. Kia tai mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea tia tau e pai ai, ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō tarangi. Let your kingdom come and your will be done. Let us have a world view of your peace and your aroha in this world. Let us think that this world could be a beautiful place, most of all for the vulnerable, the poor, the least of us in this blessed city of Otipoti. Ho mai ki a mātou, aia nei, he taro ma mātou mo tēnei rā. Give us our daily bread. Sustain us in all the mahi that we have to do, today, tomorrow, and for all days. Muru o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei, I o te hunga e harana ki a mātou. Forgive us for the wrongs that we do. May we be a people here that have kindness and love in our hearts, a greatness of kindness, that we may forgive one another for the wrongs that we inherently do. May the peace of that forgiveness flow through us like a river. Aua hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangia mātou I te kino. Heavenly Father, you have the mana, the aroha, me te rangi mārie, the love and the peace, to sustain us, to cleanse us. You are the source of all things good. May we keep those heavenly thoughts in all that we do. No hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia, ake, ake ake, āmine.
Thank you. I'll just, following that, thank you very much, I'll just do the housekeeping. The toilets are through the entry doors and to the right. Fire evacuation procedures, leave the building via the exit stairwell, indicated by the exit signage, which is just straight up those doors and go straight ahead towards the lift, and the stairs are there. And assemble on the footpath in front of the Night and Day on the corner of Prince Street and the Octagon. The alternative assembly point is on the footpath of Moray Place by the Dunedin Public Art Gallery car park. Please follow the instructions of the fire warden. Earthquake procedures, remain in the building, it's safer. Move away from windows and any equipment and furniture which may topple. Take shelter under solid furniture such as tables and hold on. Lock wheels on any mobility aid. If you do require assistance in the event of an evacuation, please advise the Governance Support Officer. In all cases, follow instructions given by the fire wardens, civil defence officers and emergency services. Thank you. Now we'll have public forum, and each speaker or group of speakers have up to 5 minutes to speak on your subject, which will be followed by up to 5 minutes of question. There's a timer shown on the screen. Please push the button on your microphone each time you speak. This is necessary for the taping of the meeting. It will automatically turn off when another person presses their button. Our first group for a public forum is Teresa Bowen and the students from North East Valley Normal School. She'd like to come and take a seat, thank you. You might need to bring some more chairs up for everybody. There's some behind you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko sula toku ikua.
I'm just going to remind you that you're going to talk. Go again.
Ko Cyprus toku ikua. Ko Vincent toku ikua. Ko Scarlett toku ikua.
We are students from North East Valley Normal School and we are here to ask for your help. We definitely need a pedestrian crossing at Chinkford Park.
First, it would be safer and easier for kids and elderly to travel to the park because they wouldn't have to take the risk of crossing the main road. We are not sure if you know this, but North Road is a very busy road. Also, there is a retirement home near Chinkford Park, so it could encourage the elderly people there to get active. Secondly, it would be clearly helpful for other things, not just kids wanting to play there. A good example would be that events are often hosted at Chinkford Park, such as charity events, sporting teams practicing on the fields. Also think of all the people who walk their dogs at Chinkford Park. Did you know Georgia from Sport Otago did a survey on play in North East Valley last year and found out that we need a pedestrian crossing at Chinkford Park? Apparently she has spoken to the DCC about this already.
On top of all that, it would also help the walking school bus project.
Can you start again? Again before that, you got it.
On top of all that, it would also help the walking school bus project that North East Valley Normal School is working on right now. Did you know that our school made it onto the National Teaching Magazine, the e-Gazette? This is also because we are the first school in Dunedin to participate in the government's carbon neutral school transport pilot. We have learnt all about reducing carbon to help slow climate change. Getting a pedestrian crossing would help kids walk and scooter to school rather than come by car.
It would be so helpful if we got a crossing at Chinkford Park because it would genuinely be great for safety and accessibility. In general, it would greatly benefit the community. You should at least think about it. Thanks for listening.
He aha te kai a te rangatira ko he koro.
What is the food of the leader? It is knowledge, it is communication.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think that's worthy of it. We've got some questions if you're happy to take some questions. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, students. That was great. And I know it's a bit scary sitting in front of us all, but you did really, really well. I'm interested to know, maybe you can answer this, is there any more information or data about how busy North Road is, any statistics, and maybe your teacher is able to help you or one of you has that information?
We emailed our local police constable, Eddie Smith. He said the pedestrian crossing outside NEVN school is the busiest road patrol crossing I am involved in as a school community constable. North Road is a busy and wide road to cross safely.
Waka Kotati states that North Road is an arterial road with over 6,000 cars travelling on it per day. It contains two states. Connects to State Highway 1, which carries traffic in and out of town regularly.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, children. It was a great presentation, and I actually live on North Road, just down the road from the school, just at the end of James Street. So I'm quite familiar with it, and I also do that 8,000 car movements a day is rising, so it's actually even getting higher. And there's going to be potentially more houses at the top of the valley in the next 10, 15 years, so it is actually going to get even busier. You have been talking to someone's been talking to the Transport Department already, and I guess what I'd ask is probably, because it probably hasn't you guys been talking to the Transport Department, I was wondering where are you with that at the moment in terms of the process?
Kia ora koutou. My name is Georgia Clark and I'm a Healthy Active Learning Advisor at Sport Otago. So I have done a neighbourhood play system report, which I have a copy of here if anyone's interested in looking at it. It's also on a few websites, but I've previously spoken to a few people from Transport and Scott when he was previously in his role as Parks and Rec Manager. Just have passed on the report, let them know about the recommendations, which one of them was for under the road safety area, which said to ensure social and built environment factors are addressed and will allow for mobility to play, which would importantly involve a crossing outside Chingford Park and include traffic calming measures.
Right, so I'm just figuring out how we'll move that forward in terms of getting it going. And the other one was Carbon Neutral School Project. I had an interaction with Student Climate March about 3 years ago when they asked, what are you doing? And I said, how many of you have driven to school today? And so I'm kind of interested in that. Again, has there been any communication with the council on that and our Carbon Zero 2030 target and our transport team school projects? Oh, we'll just have to sort that out too then. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well done, first of all, really good. Thank you for coming. Now, they've got a pedestrian crossing, hello Georgia, they've got a pedestrian crossing outside your school, haven't you? That's right, I thought so. And so it's further down where you want a crossing near the park, is that right? Yep, because do you go there sometimes for school? Like for an activity or something? Sometimes, yeah. What does it mean? Can I ask, what does it mean to be a carbon zero school for you? How does that change what you do? Big question, sorry. Yeah, sure.
Kia ora, my name's Teresa Bowen. I'm a Year 5-6 teacher at North East Valley School and I'm the teacher of these guys. So Carbon Neutral Schools is part of the Carbon Neutral government program, and as one of those schools we have benefited from units of learning to teach the tamariki about carbon. We've also received the carbon footprint for our school, and as part of a Carbon Neutral school what we're doing is we're teaching the tamariki about carbon in an age appropriate way. We're also gathering data on how they get to school. Transport was one of the 3 largest carbon emitters, so the government started with transport as a focus because it's the easiest way to make some change. There's really good philosophy in the unit saying that you don't have to change how you travel if travel is essential. We want people to be aware of unequal opportunity for choice, and so they then explore other ways of reducing their carbon. So it's just teaching about carbon right through the school and making some targets.
Thank you so much. How does that differentiate from a Enviro school?
EnviroSchools is a framework where you learn about Papatūānuku as a whole. This is really specifically looking at how our climate is changing and educating tamariki and actually setting goals to make change. Yeah.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Thanks, Teresa. I'll probably just ask you this question. Two-part question. Firstly, very simple yes or no for the first one. 2024 New Zealand, is it quite ridiculous we're sitting here asking for a crossing at a busy on a busy road for young'uns? Second part, more of a chunky question. Can you just encapsulate why today you've come along here with five people and supported them in your class to make the submission? Yes.
Yes.
So I didn't totally understand the first part about a bit clunky having to ask for a pedestrian crossing. I know that council funds are spread thinly, so I think it's just good for the tamariki to be able to come here and say this is a need in our community. It does feel very behind the times that only just now the carbon neutral school stuff's coming out because climate change is ramping up and people are becoming more aware of it. I wrote down a little bit about why we're here. So our climate is changing and tamariki have been learning about this from the news, from social media, from conversations at home, especially if they've got older teenagers in the house for years. In my opinion, when we teach children about our changing climate, we have a responsibility to ensure that they have the power to make change for the health of the planet. It's also important for them to be able to speak to those in power to make bigger changes. That's why we're here. For both adults and children, taking action to reduce our carbon footprint takes any worry we are having and moves it in a direction. Instead of swirling around inside our heads and hearts, it gives it a direction. And these children, these tamariki, are learning how to speak to those in power for the health of Papatūānuku.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm conscious that your time is up, but we really appreciate you coming in, and I'm sure our transport department will follow up and come back to you. And just to let you know, you can go and watch yourselves on our YouTube channel, so you can go back to school and maybe Ms. Bowen may be able to put it up and show the class that you today speaking at council. But we appreciate you the time coming in. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And next for public forum, we have Neil Haraway. Good morning.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Neil Haraway speaking for Dunedin Host. The Destination Management Plan envisages all parts of the visitor sector of Dunedin working in partnership for everyone's benefit. We really want that. Dunedin really needs that. But first we need to face how the management of Enterprise Dunedin and the DCC have failed in partnership repeatedly, and then together we can fix it. This latest DMP has taken 5 years, with the steering group putting in many, many hours and consultants paid a lot to produce 2 failed drafts. Now that plan, your plan, is already sidelined. Sadly, this is just the latest incident in years of the visitor sector being cut out by EDDCC, which has led to a gulf of mistrust. Our concerns were supported by the Martin Jenkins report of 2018, which made many criticisms of EDDCC. It noted that when ED took over from Tourism Dunedin in 2014, DCC was going to establish an advisory panel 10 years ago. Martin Jenkins very narrowly, pragmatically, it said, recommended that ED carry on within council, only because making it a CCO would be more disruptive. It did recommend improving ED, including in its operations, management and leadership issues. Did that happen? The MJ report highlighted the dysfunction between DCC and the visitor sector and did suggest discussing taking the sector out of council. When the DMP process started in 2019, we understood we'd be having those discussions. Kylie Rufio-Karawana was Dunedin Host rep all the way through. She's a tourism veteran who has produced DMPs for many RTOs. After the 2 failed drafts, she wrote the final draft, which largely became the plan you approved a year ago. A key issue for us was governance of the DMP. Just before Kylie's DMP draft went to Council, without our knowledge, the word governance was cut from priority 1 and replaced with leadership. Also cut was the phrase. This includes determining what management structure and governance structure would best suit the destination. And then, more unilateral decisions. The first was to halt steering group meetings. And now, to establish a toothless advisory panel in contravention of your plan. Why? And with a resolution and terms of reference that misled you and are wrong in several ways. It makes a bad joke of what the notes to your resolution say, that an advisory panel will strengthen the relationship between EDDCC and the visitor sector, and of the rhetoric about destination management being a shared journey. Kylie, Adrian and I on the steering committee were carefully hopeful. Kylie now writes, I can no longer stand by a process that has disregarded the core elements of the original and validated DMP, speaks in platitudes and continues to ignore the voices of the industry. So please rescind the resolution to establish an advisory group. Please empower the steering group to finish its work as per your plan. Critically, priority 1 and step 1 to together determine and enable the most effective model or structure of leadership or governance. Many of us had been open to the DMP being run by ED if its issues were fixed. Doesn't seem to have happened. So now more of us firmly believe it's best run by an independent CCO, as Martin Jenkins so nearly recommended. But we would accept an agreed solution after due process, as laid down in your plan. The need's urgent. Dunedin Host was recently told by a visiting executive from a major travel company, Dunedin has fallen off the radar. At national events, we hear that a lot. And we're often told Dunedin is perilously short of paid attractions on which coach and cruise companies gain commission. That risks Dunedin being cut from their itineraries. Dunedin has relatively low investment into economic development and visitor promotion and has low returns. We've been on a downward spiral. Under a CCO, the visitor sector will contribute financially and other sources of funding could open up. With real decision-making input, we'll get a boost of energy and can really help to grow Dunedin's economy. We can still harness the goodwill and energy of the visitor sector. I've seen them always helping each other and the great ED frontline staff spread the good word on Dunedin. We can run a real partnership if you follow the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haraway. You happy to take questions?
Yes.
Councillor Wiley.
Actually, I won't answer a question because I know the ability to not able to debate with the speaker, so I'll pass on asking the question.
Any other questions? There being none. Thank you, Mr. Haraway. Thank you for that. Next, we have Ms. Treblicott. And just to let you know that your previously circulated information is being passed around all councillors who I would imagine have all read it. Let's hope so.
Thank you. My name is Karen Treblicott. I write under the name Ella West. Maybe some of you more know me under that name. This morning I'd like to talk about Fortune Theatre, bringing back professional theatre to Dunedin in 6 months from your decision for less than $500,000. The background: Fortune Theatre, Dunedin's only professional theatre, closed suddenly in May 2018 due to financial viability. Its audience was ageing and could not access toilets down a narrow, steep stairway. The seats were uncomfortable with little legroom, the building had damp issues and ticket prices were high. Each year about 6 plays ran for limited seasons. Besides production costs, these plays plus sponsorship and arts funding supported 8 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. With the building's heritage values, its premier centre of the city site, there is no reason why Fortune Theatre should stay closed. The damp issues, as outlined in the Origin Consultants Building Report of September 2021, have been mitigated by Council, as advised by Dunedin City Council Group Manager, Property Services, Anna Nelson. Dunedin registered building surveyor and architect Craig Dodd is concerned water will still be seeping into the foundations, but Anna has advised that the theatre is dry. At a meeting with myself, Craig, Alison Horsley from Playmarket, and Anna, 1st of August, in the council offices. The proposal for the building. The proposal is for new toilets and bar on the same level as the seating, with improved street access. Kurt Webster of Webster Building Limited has prepared an estimate for this work, approximately $210,000. Kurt is well known in Dunedin for his heritage work, including a Grand Designs New Zealand TV episode. Christchurch firm Alloy Fold have supplied an estimate for new cinema-style seating at approximately $95,000. That's for 160 seats. These estimates have been prepared without access to the theatre. My request to gain access for Kurt and myself was downturned by Anna in a phone conversation on the 8th of November. There will be other issues, lighting, heating, production equipment, which may need to be addressed. The proposal for the theatre. A profitable theatre which does not rely on arts funding from Council or Creative New Zealand. A lean management team, online booking plus door sales, and a theatre open 5 days a week, February until mid-December. A venue for a professional theatre with an emphasis on Dunedin and New Zealand playwrights. Touring plays as well as local stand-up comedy, improv, poetry and music. Low ticket prices to make sure there are bums on seats and the theatre is accessible to all. A comfortable theatre which the audience enjoys spending time in. A storyteller of the people of Dunedin, a UNESCO City of Literature, and Otago. To follow the Centrepoint Theatre example, Centrepoint is currently celebrating 50 years of professional theatre in Palmerston North, a city with only a population of 80,000 people. Engagement with the University of Otago, Otago Chamber of Commerce, iwi schools, retirement villages and community groups. Supporting Dunedin playwrights, directors, actors and crew. Thank you.
Thank you. We have questions from Councillor Houlihan first.
Thank you. Hi, Karen. Are you proposing to buy the theatre? Is that what you're? Is that one of the things you're hoping to do?
I challenge anyone to buy this theatre without very expensive reports on it. The seismic strengthening, as noted in the council agenda for later today, plus the work that is required to do. The estimates, no one's got any idea. My idea of bringing this theatre back to life is not a long-term project, it's for the short term. So any work that needs to be done on the theatre as a building can be then looked at later on. But let's get the building back active and working and actually being used, and that of course looks after the interior and the exterior of the building.
So who are you proposing would pay for this work?
Proposing council do.
Councillor Wetherell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Karen, for your submission today. You mentioned creation of a profitable theatre which does not rely on funding from Council or Creative New Zealand. What's changed and who do you suggest would fund it?
My proposal for a theatre, instead of the Fortune Theatre's previous example of having plays for only 3 weeks, 6 times a year or 5 times a year, would be actually 5 days a week in the theatre. So it is accessible for different groups to be using it, hiring it out, local touring productions. Also, I do not believe in a management team of 8 people is necessary to run a theatre. So there are considerable cost savings there.
Thank you. And in your cost estimates for toilets, a bar and seating, you haven't included the cost of earthquake strengthening at all?
No, I haven't, because that's unknown until that report has been done.
Councillor Vanderbiss.
Prior to the Fortune Theatre's failure, I saw a report which noted a large number of managers. You've just said 8. And I did ask, how was it that we had so many managers in the Fortune Theatre? I went to the auction, and amongst all the other facilities, the lighting and everything else that was sold, there were 13 separate computer systems that were sold in the auction. You have said you want to have a lean management team. In the 42 years that the Fortune ran successfully, at times they did have one. What are you going to do differently to prevent the explosion, if you like, or the increasing number of managers that I think was partly behind the difficulties that they ran into?
I like to manage it myself.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Parker.
Just thinking about the Charcoal Blue report, and it said that the whole in Dunedin was kind of a theatre for 400 people, and of course there's theatre options floating around. Do you think that this fills that gap, or do you think that the theatre for 400 people is still a good option for the city?
I don't want to take away from the options that are being looked at by council for future theatres. I understand that there is considerable millions being earmarked for a new theatre and also for existing community theatres. I see this as something that we can get going next year, and to, instead of waiting for a new theatre to be built with 400 seats and that ideal, we could actually have something up and running before that happens. And I think that is important because we have a generation of Dunedin people who are missing out on professional theatre.
Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Operationally, as you suggest, one manager perhaps, could be yourself. Operationally, who would be doing that? So as a business entity, are you suggesting that council is the operator, or are you suggesting a different model than that?
That would be something up for discussion. I think we've got a lot to work out before that happens. But yes, certainly the board model that Fortune had before might, not paid, might work. But again, it's something for a discussion later on.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much. I would like to move that the council extends the public forum beyond 30 minutes. So I have a second. Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Next we have Professor Alison Phipps.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Deputy Mayor, Councillors, Public Forum, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you from about as far away as it's possible to come to Dunedin. I'm here from the University of Glasgow, where I hold the chair in refugee integration through education, languages and arts for UNESCO, a designation rather like your own City of Literature, and where I'm also chair of the Scottish Government's Committee on Refugee Integration, which is an equal partnership of all of the councils across Scotland, all 32 councils, of the NGO body, the umbrella body, Scottish Refugee Council, and the Scottish Government. For the last 15 years, I have led multi-million-pound projects in the Gaza Strip and in the occupied Palestinian territories. And I'm here to commend to you the work of Dr. Maitamini, of the diaspora who are working as refugees within your city, of the Wahine who have been supporting them from Mana Whenua, and in particular, the petition on humanitarian visas. Every day for the last 15 years, but intensively for the last year and a bit, since The bombardments began on the 9th of October. I have been in direct touch with my colleagues in the Gaza Strip. 17,500 Tamariki are killed. That's a conservative estimate, according to my colleagues in the World Health Organization. 70% of all schools are destroyed. All universities are destroyed. All archives, all cultural institutions, all theatres. My colleagues in the United Nations Relief and Works Agency and in associated relief agencies estimate that 500 trucks of aid a day have been required during the years of the blockade. In November, it's estimated that 50 trucks have entered to date. Famine has been declared in the Gaza Strip. The situation is critical, and as I am sure all of you know, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel, for the former Defence Secretary, and also for the head of the Al-Qassam brigades in the Gaza Strip. It is a plausible genocide, according to the International Court of Justice, who have now opened long-term investigations and proceedings, which are taking statements from people like myself in my role as an academic, working with the majority refugee population in the occupied Palestinian territories and across the Middle East. So I'm here to ask you, please, to support the small step of supporting humanitarian visas for families who are here in Dunedin and across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Integration into existing families is a much easier task than an emergency evacuation. It is obviously undertaken with the assistance of the United Nations, particularly UNRWA and UNHCR. It makes a vital difference to families and can save lives. There are other important ways in which people can be helped at this moment. One of them is for elite visas for people who wish to study in our universities. And that is one way in which, in genocidal conditions, it is possible to salvage something of the cultural infrastructure of Palestine, as has been undertaken previously for the Balkans and for Rwanda, in the diaspora and through our international connections and networks. So I wish to commend to you the petition, I wish to commend to you the work and the care, the kaitiaki, for the Palestinians who are in your care within Dunedin City Council, and for the ongoing work that Mana Whenua and the diaspora populations have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gehring.
Kia ora, Professor Phipson, thank you so much for coming today to share your understanding. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about what else we can do? I mean, we often feel like a very small part of it, and as you know, we have a resolution from council, and that's been followed up. We haven't had any success to date, but we keep trying. Anything further? Persistence? You need to...
I do, thank you. Persistence in repeatedly returning to those items where there's been a roadblock is vital for the well-being of the populations here, who really need to see progress, even if it's tiny, but also for those who are watching acutely. People in Gaza are watching. They will be watching this debate in council today. They will know that I am speaking to you, and it's really important that those actions of solidarity are continued. There are other things that it's possible to do, quite small-scale things. My own university at the moment is running a programme through the direction of our long-term colleague of 15 years, who was former vice principal of one of the universities in Gaza and is now part of the Universities of Gaza Emergency Committee. They are speaking worldwide to every country possible to say, please can you support us in the education of our children and the ongoing education of our students? And that's being done online. Most of my work has happened online. The digital space is a space of the future, and it is a space of hope for people. And one of the things that it's possible to do is to donate eSIMs to support people to access online educational materials. And that's a really great way of being able to be a small part of that work, but also supporting schools, colleges, universities to set up partnerships through the emergency committee that is tasked with the education of people to be ongoing in Gaza. Education is hope for people. When it is interrupted, as we know from UNHCR, then it is catastrophic, particularly for women and girls. When it's able to continue, even if it's only for 20% of what might have happened previously, there is a real resilience that can be built up for populations. So those areas are particularly helpful.
Thank you for your mahi.
Councillor Gilbert.
Whilst the question was different, the answer has been given.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Councillor Vandervis.
You mentioned other countries. Have you had any success in getting Egypt, Jordan, border countries, Syria and the UAE to begin accepting Gazan refugees?
Microphone.
The issue with Gazan refugees and the difficulty is Article 1D of the Refugee Convention. So refugees in Palestine since 1948 have been under the care of UNRWA so that their care might take place in the places to which they were illegally displaced in 1948. That's rather like UNRWA being a state offering all state institutional support and care, education, health, food programs, all of those are provided by UNRWA. UNHCR is a different organisation which cares for refugees who are in allied countries and who have crossed international borders. At the moment, UNRWA believes it is not going to be able to operate for much longer. It is at the United Nations General Assembly and also has spoken with many agencies speaking of the catastrophic situation it finds itself in. If UNRWA is unable to continue working, at that point the question of international displacement becomes critical and the care of those particular countries you've cited. What I do know is that in the diaspora much work has been undertaken and that many of those countries are the number one receiving countries for refugees, particularly in Egypt at this moment, where prior to May many Palestinian refugees were able to cross the border, often at eye-watering cost, using up all of their savings to reach safety, but in a place where they will continue to be stateless. So in Egypt at the moment, in Cairo particularly, there are multiple refugee crises where Sudanese displaced people who are seeking asylum, where Palestinian people seeking asylum or who have refugee status from UNRWA are all in a critical situation. So there is much we can also do that will support people in those neighbouring countries like Egypt and Jordan.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for any more questions, so thank you for your coming in today. That's the end of the public forum, so I'll now move to apologies. Apologies have been received from Mayor Raddick for absence and Councillor Gary for early departure today and Councillor Lafiso for absence from 10:45 until 1 p.m. today and Councillor Benson Pope for lateness this morning, who's already here. So I would like to move that those apologies be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mayhem. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, motion carried. Confirmation of the agenda. I would like to move that the Council confirms the agenda with the following alterations. That item 19, the submission on improving efficiency in the inspections process, be taken before item 7, which is the Otipoti Dunedin Housing Plan Update Report. And that the meeting moves into non-public when we break at lunchtime, and we'll be non-public from 1 p.m. and we'll reconvene in public at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning, with the first item being item 21, Local Water Done Well Decision on Model Shortlist for Water Services Delivery Plan, which will be then followed by item 9, funding for the hospital campaign. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Vandervis. I'm going to put the motion... Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Malley.
It's just 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I have to be... 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I have to be in an environment court arbitration. So the item tomorrow morning, I really... This conflict only arose last week. So long as I can be out of here by 9:30 or 9:45, I won't really be able to participate particularly heavily in that item. And I don't think it matters too much because I think there's plenty of people in the room now who know what's going on, but I'm just giving you a heads up, but I'll have to leave about 9:45 tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
We've done that for certainty given the nature of the item. Are you available at any other time during tomorrow?
I don't know. It's particularly sensitive and it's particularly private and confidential, so I can't.
Look, maybe with the leave of the meeting I might talk to staff and just check timing and availability of staff as well and see if we can maybe delay it or the meeting may debate it reasonably quickly. And that will be to your colleagues.
Yeah, and I have a feeling the outcome will be the same anyway, so I'm not overly worried.
I have a feeling so too, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we just proceed
I think just put your head, I'm just letting you know that.
Yes, yeah. I think it's probably worthwhile. You can have ask your questions and
if I could take some
and
leave.
make the opening comments maybe before you go.
That would be great.
Otherwise you might miss the item altogether. Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. Item 5, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arose between their role as an elected representative and any private or other external interests they might have. Are there any changes or updates? Councillor Lafiso.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. I have changes with respect to the Otago Mental Health Support Trust. I am not chair anymore, and I am now a trustee of the Otipoti Community Builders Charitable Trust, and I've emailed Ms Adamson with those changes.
Thank you, Councillor Lafiso. Anything further? If not, I move that the committee amends the elected members' interest register and amends the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. Confirmation of minutes. I would like to move that the Council confirms the public part of the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 30th of October 2024 is a correct record. Do I have a second? Councillor Benson Pope?
Yes, but I'd like to speak to it.
Yes.
In the passage referring to the tributes to Dame Elizabeth, there's an entry referring to Dame Hannon, which is incorrect. The protocol is the title and the Christian name, if it's not all.
Yes. Yes.
Can we just correct?
Yes.
Thank
you. I noticed that too. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. Now we'll move to item number 19, which is on page 238. Submission on improving efficiency in the inspection process, and invite Mr Henderson and Mr McLeod who will speak to the submission. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions, thank you.
Do we have any questions for Mr Henderson? Councillor Vandervis.
If you look at option 3, requiring building consent authorities to use remote inspections as a default, does that mean that, although this might be the usual thing, that you can't actually in advance say, no, this is something we have to physically inspect?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the devil's in the detail once government ultimately make a decision regarding it, but our understanding of what that means is that effectively the builder, homeowner would have the default right to say, I want a remote inspection, as opposed to physically coming on site, which is currently our preference.
And a default inspection that's remote, can you, in that situation, or is it your understanding that you can demand photographs and other information up front for that inspection?
Yes, we could. We'd obviously just need, ultimately it's about being satisfied on reasonable grounds that the inspection has passed. So we can effectively ask for anything that we believe is necessary.
And if you weren't to get appropriate or satisfactory photographs, for instance, that satisfied you that things were as they should, would the default then still be a problem, or can you just basically say no, we need better information, and if you don't provide better photographs, we're going to send somebody around?
Again, that'll be in the devil in the detail, but fundamentally if there's insufficient information to enable us to pass an inspection, then we will fail it and we'll indicate why we failed it.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I was just looking at paragraph 18 on page 240, and it just talks about the potential liability of BCAs, and I just wondered, this seems to be the biggest concern, I guess, is have you got examples of what the liability, that risk and exposure might be? Does that mean that we would have to pay out a lot if a building failed or something?
There are multiple examples that have been reported, including $120 million plus out of Queenstown Lakes. There's $100 million plus claims coming out of Auckland Council. So I guess that's the quantum of some of the claims that are out there.
So are we often, or are councils left as the last person standing? Is that what the challenge is? If other inspectors started up and something happened, would we be still at large risk?
That's the fundamental key question here. The challenge for other private industry inspectors coming on board here is trying to get the level of insurance. Given the quantum of some of those claims, it makes it really difficult and expensive for them. So yes, we are generally the last resort for liability claims.
And if I can just have a follow-up question, so if an independent third party set up and then they defaulted, then we would have to pick up the liability, unless in this legislation there's something provided in that the Crown would pick it up.
Exactly. It really does depend on the detail of where the liability settings end up through government. So yeah, if a building firm, for example, collapsed, currently there's norm industries of BCAs might get a 20% liability, but if there's nobody else to claim, it's joint and several, which fundamentally means that we might be left with the whole 100% debt liability. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks for the paper, which is very understandable, and also the excellent submission, and particularly railing against part 3. My questions relate to the report and its numbers 10 to 13, which I think are quite illuminating. So I want to just unpick a couple of them. Firstly, number 10 says that DCC building inspectors have undertaken remote inspections using the live video streams, found the process difficult and time-consuming. Can you just expand a wee bit on what those difficulties specifically were?
So I think there'll be a level of unfamiliarity with the systems and technologies themselves. There's then, hopefully, we can get a decent video connection, depending on what type of technology is being used. They have had where the builders on site or homeowners on site are using, for example, their phones, and so the quality of the pictures and videos that we can see, and because it's when you're on site, you've got that sense of familiarity, and you can get a sense of what's going on. It's very difficult by effectively asking somebody to point at a specific piece of a build. So that's the bit that takes the time, whereas you can normally just scan around a building, get a sense, look at your plans, and then pass or fail the inspection accordingly.
So expanding on that, and I guess you do mention it in the submission, so in some instances, for example, where there's very obvious stuff like the insulation in the wall, that's much easier to ascertain, but I guess the opposite of that is something more significant that may be underground and you're nodding away, is that provides a difficulty and a potential liability down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything ultimately that we pass has the potential for liability, and effectively what we're saying is that there are a number of inspections that we believe are better suited, if it became default to do remote inspections, that potentially would be less liable for us or reduce liability, whereas some we're saying that we would not really ever want to do remotely.
And cool, and I guess the modus operandi behind this is to make things easier and simpler and by default cheaper. So number 11 does say that the inspectors noted that remote inspections provide savings in travel time, but the actual inspections actually do take longer. And again, why is that? Because it seems to defeat the purpose of doing it in the first place.
Again, there'll be a level of familiarity with using the systems themselves, but again, it's because you're actually having to ask somebody to physically move a camera or a piece of equipment around. So effectively, you're double handling.
Sorry, the final one, I'll miss out 12 because it's fairly obvious, but 13, again, that opportunity for face-to-face inspections didn't think about this before I read it, provides an opportunity for education in and of itself. Will that necessarily be lost, do you think?
That's our belief. It would not fully lost, but the opportunity is lost.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on that. My question is around that paragraph 13 in the report, and I heard a previous colleague talk about sending someone round, which has that threatening sort of feeling. Can you explain how your teams approach inspections, Mr. Henderson?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we're there to serve the city, we're there to educate people, we're there to ensure that effectively what's on your building consent is what's being built. I'd like to think that we do that in a friendly, approachable way. I'm not saying that we're 100% perfect and everybody has a bad day from time to time, but I'd like to think that 99% of the time that we spend out there is in a well respected. The people who we've recruited are well respected within the industry. So, yeah, it's very much an educational approach.
I can confirm that is correct.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. On page 275 of our papers, it talks about different ways to conduct remote inspections. And I guess the first thing that, as I was reading through this paper, and I'll quote from the paper, this approach is well suited to low-risk work re-inspections for use with trusted builders with low failure rates. And so really, and I'll use a number, say 80% of everybody involved in building and associated services across Dunedin would be comfortable with on-site inspections. It's what I like to think it's about probably 3 or 5% would be uncomfortable because of the quality of the workmanship and that aspect. Would that be a fair?
I actually don't have the data to indicate which ones are, I guess, good or bad, and all I would say is that our failure rates here in Dunedin are around 60 to 70%. Although again, I think we've quoted in the report that there is a falseness in that to an extent, in that where something might not be fully complete, it would be registered as a failed inspection. And those are the ones that potentially we can do through a remote inspection or follow up with a picture later. So, for example, missing a smoke alarm or something of that nature. There are some councils, and we've talked about it here in Dunedin, where they have preferred clients or preferred builders that can clearly demonstrate quality through some form of quality management assurance. But there's quite a lot of work in getting that through for the builders, for the companies. But if that is something that a firm wanted here in Dunedin, then it's something that we can look at.
But overall, the good building professionals would be unaffected by this change. It's the ones that are the problem children of the industry who would be the ones that would be affected, as they currently are anyway.
I think it's the wider risk of so the better builders generally have got their plans in place, they've got systems in place, they know when inspections, how far out. We've reported to council that the building inspections generally this year have been around 5 days, so those better builders know when to plan to book in an inspection. I think where we've got, I guess, the lesser quality builders, they may want the remote inspections to potentially hide something.
Yeah, that's not. We don't want to bear that in mind. Unfortunately, yeah. But below what I read out was the use overseas, and there was a snapshot talking about the state of Victoria requires mandatory inspections to be done, where in the UK, USA and Canada on-site inspections are the standard approach. Is there anywhere where remote inspections, where there's data of how it's taken place and that we can add to the paper that we're presenting?
Sorry, Councillor, we're not aware of that.
So globally, it isn't accepted as a good approach.
We haven't actually done that research around the global requirements.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks for the paper. Just a couple of questions. Is there a shortage of inspectors generally around councils? Is that one of the reasons why this is being proposed? That then that gives an option. Is that a problem or not? And if it's not a problem now, do you see it being a problem in the future?
There has been issues in the past regarding workforce and skilled workforce. The ability to identify, recruit, train, obtain the mandatory qualifications, all of that can take 2 to 3 years. Where we had the big boom sort of post-COVID, where we at one point Dunedin was out at 17 days for an inspection, and quite rightly is unacceptable. So that's why we're aiming to have no more than 5. There's no regulatory target around what that looks like. So around the country, the idea of having remote inspections does provide that greater flexibility for somebody if Auckland have got capacity, for example, to do an inspection in Macargill. That there are challenges, and I think we've highlighted that within the report, though, because again there are local differences in terms of ground conditions, for example. So an Auckland inspector might not necessarily fully be aware of all different ground conditions around the country, other than that they might be familiar with Auckland.
So is one of your fears that if this goes ahead, other councils could be seen doing remote inspections for our council and vice versa for us, for others? Is that one of the concerns? Do you think that could be a reality?
We already have an ability where we can resource share with other building consent authorities. I think the fear here is that through things like self-certification, there are different conflicts. So again, if you're trying to self-certify that you're ultimately trying to make money off, whereas we don't have a financial interest in it. Ultimately, we're just trying to keep the people of Ōtepoti safe. And, you know, if you're going to buy a house in Dunedin and it's got a DCC code compliance certificate, then that effectively gives you some form of surety that says, actually, an independent has assessed this build.
So if, you may not be able to answer this, but if in the scenario that other councils started doing inspections remotely for some of our work, who gets paid for that? Does that other council get it or do we get it?
We would end up paying them. So the customer would still be invoiced here in Dunedin, but we would pay them. But again, the difference there is we would only be going to another council as if we didn't have the resources here to be able to support that, and potentially we were blowing out on the days to enable an inspection to be booked, and if they'd got the capacity to help us.
Thank you. If the my understanding is talking to some building industry people that if in here it talks about maybe tradespeople could perhaps certify some of the things, and you raised rightfully some concerns around that. One of the things that came up on some discussions I had was that what could happen with that is that the big boys, the bigger players, would perhaps be able to do that with reasonable ease, but it would mean that a lot of the little players would just fall out of the system. Is that something that you see, because the fear of the indemnity, you know, the insurance and the risks that they could be facing, is that something you're aware of?
I think it depends on whether or not some of this stuff is made mandatory by government in terms of self-certification. If there is still the ability for council to inspect, then they don't need to worry about getting the insurances and then the associated liabilities. And again, you're right, within the paper it talks about the bigger builders, for example. Again, the paper suggests that if self-certification is a direction that they want to go, from a council, we would suggest that's okay, as long as you take the liability as well.
Councillor O'Malley.
And if they take the liability, then go bankrupt, what happens next? It comes back to us again, doesn't it?
I think that'll be the devil in the detail as to whether or not that truly is the case. But currently in the settings it is a joint and several liability. So if a building firm did go bust, then yes, fundamentally we'd be left holding the full 100%.
And that was my question around indemnity. Have they clarified that, and I'm pretty sure they haven't, that we will be guaranteed not to be responsible if a self-inspection turns out to have failed?
There's no detail on that at this stage.
And effectively, the QLDC, with that 120 million at basically 2.5 times under our size, that's well over a 300 million hit equivalent to us. So my question is, the other one is efficiency and option 2. If you are we going to end up? Who's going to be who's going to get the advantage of this efficiency? Because it appears that through your own report that basically the amount of time it takes is probably neutral, because even though it took you less time to get there, it takes you longer to do the inspection. And then option 2, we have to have the systems and capability to conduct this built in place. So that'll come as a cost to us, I assume.
So the technology, we have some level of technology now in terms of it. If we were to go to a mandatory default setting of remote inspections, then we would need to look at that as a different product, and there are products out there, and I say a number of the councils use them. We haven't done the costings of those at this stage, because I said that the number's relatively small that we've got.
Right, but it still will come at a cost. And then the other one is just back to the leaky building period. How different is this in terms of inspections and other such things, and have lessons been learnt from that period, which evidently I would say probably not with indemnity of RCAs. Have any lessons been learnt that are in this proposal to reflect what was exposed last time and covered for it this time? Can you find an example in the legislation that does that?
I think there's an awareness of what happened previously. Whether or not this takes into account, I'm not sure, Councillor.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was looking at the Minister's forward, which said that it was supposed to increase this change was supposed to increase the number of affordable New Zealand homes, increase efficiency and competition, and drive down barriers and costs. And I'm curious, do you charge less for remote inspections?
No.
And if remote inspections, I think following on from Councillor O'Malley, were to become more of them, then we would actually have to possibly increase costs because we would have to be investing in more technology. Would that be logical?
There may be an increase on the technology costs, but then you could possibly counter that by saying that we might need less vehicles, for example.
So the inspections are 100% user funded, is that correct? So there's no ratepayer money for the inspections?
So building services is currently under the rate funding policy 25/75, but there's a whole heap of work within building services which is TA function and compliance based. So my guess would be is that the inspection is fully funded.
My next question was just around on the letter on page 245. I just look at paragraph 7, which says the DCC does not support option 3, and I just, because there are so many reasons not to support option 3, I just wondered if there could be stronger wording in that, because I just note that there were quite a number of particular reasons why we didn't support it, but I just wondered if it could be stronger. I know it's followed up in the attachment, but it's just about whether which bits are read more by the people taking the submissions, and I don't know the answer to that, but I just wondered if it could be strongly does not support option 3. I don't know what the feeling is around the table, but having looked at that, I just wonder whether that's a thought.
Councillor Mayhem.
Following on from Councillor Barker, I was going to suggest that too, that we needed to specify the major things that should never be carried out remotely. Framing, ground bearing capacity, cladding, piles, foundations, complex projects. It's on page 10 of the, 265 in the item 11, any inspections that should never be carried out remotely, and then there's some more detail into option 3 there. I support what Councillor Barker's saying. My question is, how do we compare on other councils with our 70% failure on, is that normal, the failure rate of inspections?
My understanding is that they are similar. I say we would report ours slightly differently. So I know, for example, one of the local councils doesn't necessarily fail an inspection that is okay, but it's not complete. I think they classify it as in progress. But certainly across the country, my understanding is somewhere around the sort of 40, 50, 60% mark of the failure rates.
And under what can be done to reduce inspection failure rates, there's been a suggestion that the liability settings be changed so that the consent authority is not jointly liable and greater liability sitting with the people carrying out the work. How would this be implemented? Like, how would we transfer that responsibility to the builder?
I guess that's where the regulations would need to be clearer. Currently, as I say, where we have a claim and it goes to court, there's a rule, informal rule that suggests that BCAs generally have a 20% liability, but again, that's assuming that there are people that are there still trading, have the means to pay, or have the appropriate insurance covers. Where they don't, joint and several liability, we may end up taking the full 100%.
But this submission is not going to be able to progress that, is it? No. And so you've suggested also education and training plus regular competency assessment is another suggestion. How would that be followed up from this submission?
So again, that would be through MB. So for us as a building consent authority, all of our building inspectors are required to have a competency assessment. It was annually. It's now, depending on where they're on the matrix, it might be every 2 years. So they get assessed. And effectively what we're saying is that a licensed building practitioner, an LBP, MB could introduce a similar competency scheme where they have to demonstrate that they continue to learn, continue to understand, continue to apply best practice and provide evidence of that, like a continuing professional development for some other roles.
I took that to mean tradespeople, not staff, but all of our inspectors are builders, aren't they?
Generally come from the building industry, either through building or design work.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. So in my industry, when you're checking something, it's generally by touch, smell or taste. I'm assuming you guys don't lick studs or whatever, but I'm also assuming that there are going to be some things where you're either going to need to soak in the entire, you've kind of mentioned it, soak in the entire picture, not just what can fit on a screen, but also I'm assuming there's going to be, I don't know, you going up and feeling, shaking, that sort of thing, which can't really be done on the phone, I'm assuming.
Correct.
You've also mentioned in here that currently it's about 10% are done remotely. Can you just clarify what to you would be the upper limit of what you would be comfortable in saying we could accept that this percentage of inspections are done remotely?
I think at this stage we're suggesting that our preference is a lower or still remaining less than 10% would be our preference. Our preference still is to go out onto site to again see it, feel it, touch it, not lick it. Yeah.
And the final one is just as clarification. So we don't charge any less. It takes longer to do. It's not necessarily as good, and it's not applicable or appropriate in all or many situations. That's ostensibly what we're saying in this digital, by distance inspections.
That's our belief, yes.
Councillor O'Malley.
It's a procedural question following up on Councillor Barker's question. In Part 7, where it says DCC does not support option 3, do we have to move a motion to change that to something like strongly opposes, or can we call that a minor editorial? Because I think actually changing it to strongly opposes is better than does not support. So I would move an amendment if we had to, but if it's considered a minor editorial and everybody kind of nods, then I don't have to.
I'm asking the chief as she comes into the room. So if we just want to amend the wording to strongly oppose, is that considered as Part B, authorising the chief executive to make any minor editorial amendments, or do we need to?
7, page 252. Oh, it depends on your version. Yeah. Electronic.
So just catching up, so you're saying instead of the DCC does not support, it's the DCC strongly opposes. I would suggest that is more than minor.
You know.
Move.
So I've already moved.
Councillor Houlihan has foreshadowed that she was going to move the resolution. So that's an amendment to the resolution. We've still got just one more question to go, I think, and then you'll move that. Okay.
I'm happy to.
You had a question still, Councillor Houlihan.
So this is a disruptive thing in the industry, coming in to try to solve a problem. What they might ask is, if all councils come back saying we're not happy with this, is, well, what do you propose to save it? Not to save it, to change, to solve the problem. What do you propose to make it faster, to consent buildings and help move housing forward? Is there anything we can say if they come back with that?
there's a lot that we could say about that. But if, for example, you take processing timeframes of 20 working days, that's a blanket 20 working days. They could regulate that says residential, we want those within 10 working days, for example. You could regulate that inspections should be no more than 5 working days, and therefore that would put pressure on, I guess, as a council to ensure that we've got the right resourcing and right trained people to be able to turn things around quickly. Certainly the latest report that came out of BRANZ, so the Building Research Association in New Zealand, effectively talked about these mythical clock stopping systems within councils, and it basically dispelled all of that. It is around the architects and the designers making sure that they submit their plans correctly, completely, in the right style and format, and a level of consistency. So I think you could get the parties together effectively and try and work towards a better system that ultimately achieves what we're after, which is the faster, more efficient, but maintaining the safety, and then the question around the liability. Again, if somebody wants to take on the liability, then go for it.
Councillor Gary.
Yeah, just to follow up on the point you've made, is it not the case that one of the challenges is that that consents are no longer a simple matter that individuals can just pop one in and expect that it's going to be successful, and then inspections are going to be straightforward? Is it not the case that part of the onus is on those applying, and it requires a designer or a experienced builder to provide that information? Is that not one of the major challenges we have? And I know you've done a lot of work in this already.
Yeah, certainly there's no restriction on in terms of the submission, but you are correct in that if you've got a professional designer, architect that knows what they're doing, or a good builder, and they put in a good set of plans, then obviously it's quicker, it's cheaper, etc. Yes.
So just for clarification, the exception to that would be if you were doing restricted building work, in which case you would have to employ a licensed building practitioner to do that piece of work. And the licensed building practitioner scheme is managed by the government.
And just subsequent to that, Mr. Henderson and Mr. McLeod, if there's lots of really great builders out there who may not be great at putting in consent applications, or they might be really good at building, but perhaps the admin part isn't part of their wheelhouse. Would that be, with all due respect, would that be accurate?
Yes, that would be accurate.
I think that might be the end of questions, yes. So thank you, gentlemen. There are a lot of questions there, so thank you for your very good answers. Now, Councillor Houlihan had foreshadowed that she wishes to move the resolution that's up on the screen. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Van der Vis. And Councillor O'Malley has foreshadowed he wants to amend that. It's included in the substantive motion. Are we happy with that? Yes. Okay, that's great. Councillor Houlihan, would you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, thank you. I think it's a no-brainer that we submit on this. There's so many things. The minute you start asking a question, there's more and more and more issues that are arisen. For example, and the big one is the indemnity. And like if, as we heard in the question time, that if, say, for example, a building project starts and then there is the builder goes bust, we are left with all the liability, and that's money, ratepayer money, that would have to be paid out, and I don't think ratepayers want us taking on that sort of risk. And at the moment, of course, we have that risk now, but we feel we have insurance for it to cover it, but because we go out and do most of the inspections, our inspectors, we expect and hope, are very thorough, and go out and they're thorough because they know that if they don't do their job properly, it'll come back to us, and no council wants that. So the suggestions on here, while I appreciate a disruptor in an industry to try to solve a problem. I think what's happened here is that maybe there hasn't been enough consultation with councils prior to coming out with this, and it's possibly been rushed a bit and not thought out on the implications. So I think certainly alerting the government to the issues with this, there could be major problems for councils, and that we seriously oppose mandatory regulations being forced on councils that could create larger problems than there already are.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, I would support a lot of what Councillor Houlihan's just said. It's when you look at what the government is intending here, I can see it going through if they were the backstop, if they were the ones that actually were the ones that picked up all the responsibility at the end and not the councils. Good legislation is about taking responsibility for that legislation. This to me is a case of wanting to do something and then actually saying, oh, by the way, you councils will pick up the pieces if this doesn't work and you will be responsible for it. And I think that's where I do see at odds on this, so I do support the changes as well accordingly.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this motion, and I believe that the suggestions made by government, particularly around option 3, will have unintended consequences. I want to applaud our staff in the consenting and inspection area. I've witnessed their educative, friendly, personable approach, but very firm around the work they have to carry out in the regulatory framework. They are a credit to our organisation, and I didn't experience this. I did it from a distance, so I speak with confidence around that. I also, so that face-to-face aspect of inspections is so important around the relationship, because we do have a problem with perception out in the community for some. Long gone are the days where you stick a consent application in, or you conduct an inspection and the homeowner or the organisation does that without some expertise help. So this has become a much more complex process, and we can thank the Leaky Homes situation for that. And let's think about what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent harm. We're trying to prevent poor building. And I made the point earlier that we have great builders in this city, and my comments are not a criticism of them, but it is the case that many who are perhaps towards the end of their career and really excellent builders may not be great on the some of them on the more complex aspects of the consent. And we've all heard complaints from homeowners and organisations around how long it takes and failing inspections and so forth. But often it's because the information provided is not complete. That is why it takes longer than it should. And so it's trying to educate the community. And I know that our staff have been working over a period of time with the sector and to really excellent effect, and we'll need to do more of that going forward. But I am really concerned about the idea of compulsory remote inspections, the default being that. I don't think that is the way to go. I think we missed something there. And shout out to our team for their mahi.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's neurologically true or not that goldfish forget everything as they turn around and round in a bowl or not, but they certainly do have a miserable life. There is a goldfish thing going on here. This is quite literally going back to where we were before Leaky Homes going. It's all too expensive, it's all too hard, and if you put it in the industry, they'll do it. They know the best, they're so efficient, and they're so good at what they do, there'll be no problems. And it came out quite badly. And the fact of the matter is, this doesn't look like it's got any more protection sitting in it than that last time that the regulations were reduced. And the most important component is, and everybody's touched on it, they haven't addressed indemnity. And bottom line is, we are a very litigious country. As much as we don't believe we go to court more often than Americans, and I can assure you, having lived in both countries, that's a fact. So if we are not protected from the indemnity, if we're not given indemnity, this is nothing but a dangerous piece of legislation, super dangerous. And I think that the submission has caught all the points that need to be caught, and it's a fantastic submission. And I'm glad we're changing that to strongly opposes.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I won't go over too much ground that's already been gone over, but firstly, thanks to staff for what I think's an excellent and on point and well explained submission for lay people like myself. Reading the submission when I originally read it did instantly raise some red flags for me, and I guess us as a building consent authority, and particularly as is highlighted, and we've all talked about that option 3 requiring us to and others to use remote inspections as the default approach to conducting inspections just seems a weird one to me. And I'm no expert. In fact, I know less about building than I do about car engines, and that's saying something. I've little interest in both. But I do actually see some sense, and hence my question earlier, in using the remote capability for the really obvious things where there's absolutely no ambiguity, like putting insulation in the wall, but also that's counterposed with the idiocy of suggesting that we do some really serious stuff that may have real life implications, and life being the key word here. I think that's potentially dangerous territory to go down. Yeah, I mean, to me, the analogy is a wee bit, I was thinking of some analogies when I was reading this, and I guess it's a wee bit like asking driving instructors to analyse your driving test while they're sitting on the couch at home watching Netflix, instead of being next to you in the car. It potentially comes with risks, so that's why I support a stronger suggestion in the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm glad we've added the word strongly, because as I read through the submission, I was very, very concerned about what it was trying to achieve, the why of the government changes, and then actually the can of worms that it opened. During my question, I said that they were trying to increase the number of affordable New Zealand homes, increase efficiency and competition, and lower barriers and lower costs. And there was some logic around that. My concern was that there was 4 outcomes that they wanted. So the system is efficient, the system is responsive to change, so we can see that, and that there are now remote inspections available. However, the other 2 roles and responsibilities are clear. The options do not make the system more complex and ensure that liability falls on those best able to identify and manage risk, and that is where this fails. And the requirement and decisions are robust. The options do not increase the risk of defects, and I think that also doesn't address those 2 outcomes there. And Mr. Henderson said when he was answering some questions that our main role is to keep the people of Ōtepoti safe, and that's around safe buildings and also keeping us safe from litigation. So I'm pleased that we've added those words, and I think it was a really good and thorough submission. I certainly learned a lot, and it was well reflected in the letter, so do support the motion.
Councillor Bandervis.
Yeah, the reason I can support it is because of the option 3 that requires inspection as a default. I do think, however, that we need to recognise that inspections are moving technologically. Photographs are much easier and quicker these days. The new phones give better photographs than any SLR that we would have had 15 or 20 years ago. And that there will be inevitably, because of technology, a move to remote for a whole lot of reasons. There are also some advantages to remote inspections, and that is that if they are all done essentially online, then you can very easily check to see whether things have been done appropriately, because there is a complete record that you don't get when you have a personal inspection. So I anticipate that in future the remote inspections will become more common, and that they will be appropriate in many situations. It's just the requirement that they be the default that I see as being problematic here. It was also mentioned that if, for instance, our staff are completely inundated because there's a boom in this part of the country and not elsewhere, that other entities could do remote inspections. That has real economic pluses, I think, potentially as well. But I approve of this particular motion because it basically means softly, there's going to be some remote inspections, and this will give us an opportunity to see how those remote inspections go, and will also give government an opportunity to clarify properly, which I don't think they have, the liability issues. Liability can only lie in the authority that actually has the final sign-off. And if the authority doesn't want to sign off because they're not happy with, for instance, remote inspections, well, then you can't force liability on them. So I'm happy with this.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you. I support this motion, but I disagree with Councillor Vandervis about the move to conducting these remotely. I agree with what Mr Henderson said about if you fail an inspection because you don't have a smoke alarm, well, that would be an incident where you could follow up with a photograph. I support all of the reasons that we should never carry out a remote inspection for major things like foundations, cladding, piles, framings, bearer capacity, etc. There is a list of 14 minor things that could be carried out remotely. The installation of insulation, air seals, although I don't know how you'd check an air seal opening on an external wall remotely. Site location, well, yes, but how do you check that a membrane is waterproof? By looking at a photograph, or the moisture content of timber, unless someone's holding a moisture gauge right there in front of the lens and showing you on that moisture meter. But then how do we have quality control and know that a builder is not just doctoring those things? So I think it's really important for us that we stick to our guns about inspections, the important things and the not so important things. And I think it would be unwise for us to move to remote inspections. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Hurling, would you like your right of reply?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, as it reads in the report, we already do remote inspections by video, and where you've got a property that's out of Dunedin and they are coming, perhaps a relocation or something, and they're bringing the property through, they use video inspections for that. So I can see the benefit of some of these. My concern, like everybody else, most councillors around this table, is the mandatory option, that we strongly disagree with that. And I do agree with Councillor Vandervis. I think as technology improves, I think there will be opportunity for us to do more of this, but we have to make sure the indemnity issue is covered, because councils can't be left holding the bag and not being able to pay for it, because we'd go bust fast as anything if we didn't have ways to cover ourselves to know that that work was done properly. And it's very difficult. If there's also another option here, if there's talk that maybe tradespeople could do it, while we've got great tradespeople in our city, there's no denying that. One of the issues that could come up with that is that you'll find the big boys, the bigger businesses and building would perhaps look at doing that and may have the ability to do it. But the majority of our our builders in our city are one-man or two-man operators, and for them it just wouldn't, the admin that goes with all that and the paperwork, they wouldn't be able to take on that workload properly, so it would leave a lot of those operators out, and that could have implications on the building workforce in our city as well. So there's so many things that could be impacted by this. So thank you everyone for your comments, and hopefully the Minister listens to this and we get something that's more common sense and provides indemnity for councils.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm now going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. I would like to now adjourn the meeting till 10 to 11. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. Thank you. I was thinking, I looked at the time and thought, we need to have a break. Thank you, councillors. I'm conscious that we've got a long agenda, so with that I would like the meeting to resume, please, councillors. Councillors, we're ready to resume the meeting, please. On item number 7, page 36, the Otipoti Dunedin Housing Plan Update Report. I'd like to invite Ms Moran and Ms Brown to the table, who will speak to the report. Welcome.
Thank you, councillors. We're happy to take questions.
Councillors, do we have any questions on the Otipoti Dunedin Housing Plan Update Report? Councillor Barker.
I sent some questions through last week. I'll just see if I'd had an opportunity to have them answered. I just had a question about the page 39, the Eco Design Service, and I see that 7 councils through New Zealand have it. And I just wonder how many people use this service in Dunedin.
Thank you, councillor. Before I came over here, I wanted to catch up with Lisa, but she isn't in until 9:30 this morning, so I can't give you the numbers. I don't believe it's 7 councils, by the way. I believe it's only 3 or 4. But she is very well utilised. She's a 0.8 staff member, and she is out and about a lot. But I can get those numbers for you.
My next question is on page 38, which is more information on the Otipoti Housing Alliance, because I just wanted to understand where all of the organisations in Dunedin sit and where they do. I know there must be a bit of a Venn diagram, but I just didn't quite understand that one.
So the Otipoti Housing Alliance, or the Otago Housing Alliance, is a regeneration of the Cosy Homes Trust, but with some extended views and activities. A couple of the councillors here have attended one of their hui earlier in the year, and they're having those regularly. And their trust deed identifies that they lead and facilitate the development of strategies, frameworks, collaborations, policies, initiatives, funding and developments to ensure that, and then there's a list of things with regards to housing. It's an aim to link up groups like the university, research into the housing space in Dunedin.
So does that cross over any work that council's doing?
We are involved with them in an informal way, but yes.
I had a question, page 44, what is CHP? I think is it in a table somewhere?
Community housing provider. And in Dunedin we have 2 that are specific to Dunedin, which is PSO Homes and Comcare, and then we have one that's national, which is Salvation Army, and those are the groups that can attract IRRS funding from government.
And page 30, what was it, 32, page 39, paragraph 30, what does the number of stars entered mean? I think this is on the homeless register, or what?
Yeah, kia ora. The STARS is the frontline tool that our frontline staff across the country, across the city, are using to have a trauma-informed conversation with the people who are homeless. We have currently 23 frontline practitioners from 10 different organisations using it in its entirety, and I checked the number before I came, and we have 7 completed stars at the moment. What this does is it gives us an idea across the 10 major points that cause somebody to go into homelessness. It gives us an idea of what are the main drivers in Dunedin, and that will give us some ability to plan forward and adjust some of our strategic thinking.
And I also had a question about who owns that database, just around the privacy. Are the people named, or have they got great protection?
So we hold the licence, and all of the various agencies are licensees to us. There is a naming convention that allows us to see all of the stars, as council, to see all of the stars, but not see any of the names, and each individual person can only see the ones that they have inputted.
And my last question is just around how are we measuring success? When I look back to the original Housing Action Plan, I just wondered, how are we measuring success?
Thank you, Councillor. We have considered measurables, but for a strategic project particularly, we found
the only measurables that we could come up with quite superficial, and we kept coming back to outcomes, but we will go back and give that further thought. I think measurables can probably be achieved throughout council, but it will take a wider view of things.
Councillor Vanderbiss.
One of the real issues that we have is the cost of land or suitable sections. Sometimes half of the cost of a home these days. Looking at Action 7, you're looking at all possible land buildings completed that are zoned residential and identifying potential opportunities. Have you also looked at the possibility of building in areas that aren't zoned residential but where there would be no real adverse effects? Have you looked at any other ways of making more sections available where effects-based considerations rather than zoning areas are looked at?
Thank you, Councillor. The land that we've been looking at so far is solely council-owned land. That's not under the Crown land legislation or requirements. I have not thought of doing that. That would be a question for city development, but I'm happy to have a conversation with them.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you very much. We were talking earlier about the Ōtepoti Housing Alliance. There is a hui on Wednesday afternoon, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that open to the public if other councillors wanted to come along?
I'm certain that it would be.
In the document here, it says we are prioritising our most vulnerable. I'm interested if you could maybe elaborate on some of the major points that lead to homelessness. I feel like, you know, there are a lot of people out there that may be one bill payment away from being homeless.
So the research that that underpins the system that we're using identifies 10 different aspects of somebody's life. Everything from, you know, obviously where they're living specifically, right through to crime, hope, and all sorts of things. And so far, we're able to pull reports. So far from the numbers that have been put in, the top few things where people are identifying as being stuck are friends and relationships, which is interesting, money services, caring for myself and how I feel. So those are all very emotive things that gives us a feel that actually alcohol and drugs is quite a long way down the system, the scheme of things. And maybe we need to start thinking about how we might bring our community together, how we might offer places for people to do drop-ins, how we might advertise some of those drop-in centres more. Those sorts of things is already the stuff that's coming through through the STAR work that we've done, which is really interesting.
So it's not just financial, it's interpersonal relationships are affecting people's situations.
Absolutely, and even things like how you spend your time, so being involved in things like sport and so on. So there's a whole range of things that have been seen to get somebody into homelessness.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So would you say, when you say friends and relationships, is that, I don't know whether you have the details, so if you can't answer it, don't worry. Is that meaning a breakup where they're then left? Is that what you take from that?
Yeah, it can be a breakup. I mean, at the moment in Dunedin, we don't have a place for men to go if there's a trespass order out of a family. So we don't have a place for men to go to as emergency housing, and MSD's new rules identify that actually they have contributed to their homelessness, so therefore they are not eligible for emergency housing. So there's some solid examples of things that would lead someone to that, but that's not the only way.
When they say money services, is that like lack of budget advice, or what do you take from that?
Yeah, for some people it's a lack of budget advice, but for others it's actually not having an address to be able to get a benefit in the first place.
Yes, good point. And caring for myself and how I feel, does that relate to...
Microphone, councillor.
Mental illness. Oh, is that referring to mental illness, do you think?
Yeah, I think how I feel is definitely in that mental illness space, maybe not feeling like they fit in. And I'm assuming, and it is an assumption, but that sort of links into what we know of especially our young LGBTQI plus youth who are featuring quite highly in statistics in the Western world.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. This morning, several of us attended a white ribbon breakfast, and I was incredibly shocked at the stats. They were much higher than I thought. And I wanted to ask you, is that captured, domestic violence captured in that first one, would you say?
It's not specifically captured, but it makes part of the whole picture.
I've got a question on your paragraphs 21, 22, and you talk about coordination of incentives across a number of groups, not limited to grants, remissions of rates, building services costs, and you talk about reports coming to council to identify options, prioritising those that have alignment with the various strategies and plans. Is that going to be part of the 9-year plan? Or is that just something in general coming down the track at some later point?
Yeah, it's going to be down the track. The coordination of that, as you might imagine, is large.
I would have thought so. That's why
but
I was...
The biggest thing is we want to try and align as many of our plans as we can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Mayhem.
I'd just like to foreshadow I'm happy to move this motion, and I'd like to ask action item 11 and 14, run further Dunedin training. Is that for DCC staff? And then facilitating a homeless hui. How would you circulate that, and how would you make sure you were capturing young people sleeping on couches as part of that statistic?
So the first portion, the training, is the next lot of outcomes STAR training. To actually have a trauma-informed conversation with our homeless folk, you have to actually be trained. And we have had about 30 people trained so far in the city. We obviously want more. Not all of those will be offering the full trauma-informed conversation. We sent people through that training, like our security staff, for example, so that when they start having conversations with people out in the field, then they can start using those skills rather than doing a whole STAR. So we want to run more of those. We've got more NGOs, charities and people to send through. With regards to the homeless hui, that is very much a Jill dream at the moment. There is a really amazing hui that is run in Australia on an annual basis by a group called the Forgotten Women, and they do a sleep out. They have people from businesses who pay basically to become homeless for a day and experience what it's like. And then they obviously have fundraisers, hear from people who are homeless, do tours by people who were formerly homeless about where they slept, where they got their food. So yeah, it is very much watch the space.
I'll put my hand up to participate in that. And also, thank you, Jill, for having that dream. Also, you were talking about NGOs and charities. Would that include people that are actively already supporting, like the blanket, the bedding and blanket lady for that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We invited everybody that we could think of to the training, and we filled it up. And we will likely do it again. We're also very lucky to get some funding from a place called the Gift Trust, and they're a group who you can donate to anonymously with a specific bent of whatever you want to support in your area. They gifted us $5,000, which allowed us to send every NGO and charity person through the training for free.
Fantastic. Any more questions, councillors? Councillor Mayhem has foreshadowed that she wishes to move the motion that the council notes the updates against the Otipoti Dunedin Housing Plan 22 and its Implementation Plan 23-24, and notes the 24 to 26 Implementation Plan based on the vision and goals of the Otipoti Dunedin Housing Plan 2022. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gilbert. Councillor Mahan, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. I'd just like to thank staff very much for the series of actions, 1 to 14. It's a shame that facilitating a homeless hui is, 15 actions, that the homeless hui is so far down the list. But it's very encouraging to know that we're having trauma-informed conversations, because what we know about homelessness in the city is that people are very guarded. They're homeless for a reason. There are so many complex things involved, and I certainly remember being in a financial situation where, bills piling up could mean that homelessness was not very far away. If you've ever had to go to the food bank or worry about looking after your children, I think that it's really important. There are a lot of hidden statistics here surrounding women and youth in Dunedin at the moment, and I commend the work of Jill and the team to really focus on prioritising our most vulnerable, and I love the fact that we are having a functional zero approach to homelessness. So I can't wait for the day when we can say as a city that we are truly taking care of our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think a city should be judged on how it treats its most vulnerable, and homeless people are obviously some of our most vulnerable, and I think we need to do whatever we can to help them. I also think, obviously, they need to help themselves in many ways too, but sometimes those people can't. If it's mental health issues, if it's, they've gotten such a hole financially, they're finding it difficult to get out. That society is set up, sadly, in a way now, and I would say probably more so with this government, that it's really difficult. If you're struggling, you're going to struggle more. And it's a very, very difficult situation for councils to deal with. Some of those people won't take help, and some of them really desperately need help. If you've taken some time to talk to some of the homeless, some of them have had really good careers and have done well in their lives, and then something snapped. They might have had a nervous breakdown or a death in the family or something happened. So this sounds a bit ominous, but any of us, it could happen to any of us at any time, is that we're all just close to homelessness if certain things happen in our lives that could change us to act differently or to do, and that applies to the public as well. So we just need to be aware that people do need care and look at what we can do to help.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Mayhem, do you want your right of reply?
Yes, I just think we need to be very careful not to say that people need to help themselves. I think there's very many complex reasons around why a person is homeless, and particularly we need to have that trauma-informed lens, and I'm not about to judge anyone based on their circumstances, but I sit here in this seat to uplift every resident and make sure they are cared for, safe and protected while they live in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm now going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Item number 8, 231 Stewart Street public consultation. I'd like to invite Mr. West, Ms. Nielsen, Ms. Sleeman to the table, and I'd just like to remind colleagues that this paper is about the building, 231 Stewart Street. It's not about any activity that has happened in the past in the building, so please limit your questions and discussion, debate to the building itself. Oh yes, Mr. West, would you like to maybe to start off, would you like to clarify the piece in the newspaper this morning?
Yes, I did send an email to councillors just prior to the meeting about the ODT article, which indicated that we were seeking council to remove the building from the heritage list, and that is not the case. It's from the significance and engagement policy of council, Schedule 2. So a slight difference there.
Do you have any opening remarks, Ms Nielsen, or no opening remarks? Sorry, Mr Morsley. We have questions from Councillor Vanderbiss.
My first question is to you, the Chair. You've said that we're only to talk about the building itself and not about its former use. I would have thought that any discussion of the building would, and especially its viability, would have to involve its future use. You can't have a building for any length of time not being used and be viable. So my question to you is, how can we really talk about the building without also talking about what its potential uses are?
My apologies, I meant its former use. It's former use. We're not here to discuss the Fortune Theatre or when it was a church or any of those other uses it's had in the past. We can talk about future uses, but we're not here to traverse the prior uses and what may have happened in the past.
So you're not ruling out a former use as been suggested this morning being a future use?
No, I'm not ruling that out.
Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. No, future use is absolutely fine. Councillor Atkin.
That was the first part of my question, so I'm glad we've got that sorted. The second part is it's to do with the, I suppose, the compliance of the building if it was to be used, even short term, for, as was raised this morning at the public forum, professional theatre. And the suggestion this morning was, 5 days a week for basically 10 months of the year. And doing the math on that, it looks as though it could be viable, but I don't know enough about the operational detail. But in terms of the building, because that's really what we're here to talk about, is it practical if there was, say, 500,000 spent on seating and toilets and so on and so forth, could it be used for a short to medium length of time for the likes of professional theatre going back in there again? And be compliant under the building code, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Sorry, it's a tricky one to answer. We haven't done the work to uncover what the true cost would be to return it to an operating theatre from a building perspective. Some of the things, I guess, to think about with the building is that fire separation would need to be looked at. So fire separation and emergency systems, if you're going to be using it as an occupied theatre for 150 plus people, we'd need to be thinking about that. We'd need to be thinking about the electrical, the heating, ventilation and air conditioning. We'd also need to consider accessibility of the space and the facilities itself. Then the theatre fit out itself. You'd want to be thinking about things about like load in and out capability and capacity for any type of performance. Storage. There's quite a lot to think about, and I guess that's why I can't easily answer what would that cost.
No, that's not what I was asking, sorry. I'm not asking what that would cost. What I'm wanting to know is that, and great, it's great that you've identified those things, but if they were, all those things were taken into account to make it functional in some way, when we're talking about the earthquake strengthening, for example, does that need to be done before it can be used again, or can it continue on with, shall we say, same use sort of thing going forward for a short to medium period of time without having to do that?
Sorry, it's just not a simple answer, Councillor. The facility as it stands at the moment is not usable. There's floors missing, there's stairs missing, there's all sorts of things that we'd need to address to make it usable as a public space. Seismic's just one of them that we'd need to consider. At the moment, there would be no legislative requirement for us to strengthen it to use it again, but there's a whole raft of other things that we would need to look at.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Point 16, you mentioned that the change to the legislation means that an updated seismic assessment is required. will this not have to be done as part of any sale, either by any potential purchaser or by ourselves?
No, a sale wouldn't be contingent on that at all.
So we're expecting people to buy it without doing, if we were to sell it, we're expecting people to buy it and not do a seismic assessment.
It would be up to the person that potentially purchased it to choose if they wish to do that now. There's a good chance that the regulatory authority may send them a notice requiring them to do an assessment within a year of receiving that notice, which is the legislation we're all required to meet. But right now we haven't received any notice and there's no requirement to do a reassessment at this point.
I think it probably they would. However, as has been pointed out in the public forum, it's been mentioned that there is certainly desire in the community, with parts of the community, and some support for reimagining the site into a theatre of sorts, but that seems to be contingent on an image or a memory that people have of the state or the condition of the building. And as certainly we were informed in public forum, access has not been available to see the current state of this current condition of the building. Is there any possibility that during part of any process that we decide on from here, that interested parties may be allowed some form of entry to be able to ascertain the building's current condition, because that may alter plans?
At the moment, it's not really safe to have all or anybody who was interested or curious to go in and have a look at the building. But I'm mindful that perhaps we need to communicate in some way during that consultation what the condition is of the building, but I'd be hesitant to open it up for a public tour. And saying that if council was to get the feedback and there was support and you chose to sell it, then of course we'd let interested parties come in and view the property.
Councillor Mayhem.
Partially my question's been answered. I was interested in what Ms Treblecock had to say this morning about Back to Life program to make the building used and working. Would that not make it more attractive? But I understand there's some dollar signs attached to that. So if we were to sell and we pitch this to somebody, would we provide figures to suggest what needs to be done?
No, it really depends what somebody would want to use it for, in terms of what needs to be done. Just to give you if you wanted to make it a theatre, you'd keep it dark, great. If you don't want to make it a theatre, you want it a cafe, you'd take all the hoarding down from the interior and open up the beautiful stained glass windows. So it would take us time and cost to generate a cost for something that might be totally useless to a future purchaser.
Councillor Vandervis.
You've said that floors and stairs were missing. I understand that a lot of the chattels were taken out when there was that auction. Why were floors and stairs removed?
I think it's really quite well known publicly, so I really speak quite freely about it. There was mould issues in the property and there was moisture issues with the property. When the property was closed up, those moisture issues got worse, to the point where it has damaged some of the staircase and the soft furnishings in the property, so carpets and some wall coverings. So we've done work to get it dry now, but it's staying dry with the help of dehumidifiers.
But floors needing to be removed?
Yes, in the back right-hand green room, one of the changing rooms is where the majority of the moisture was coming in. To deal with the moisture, we had to remove the wall linings and the floor coverings because it was coming down the wall and under the floor.
So it was the floor coverings rather than the floors that were removed?
The boards have been removed as well, unfortunately, in that space. It was just wet.
Right. You've also said that it's not safe to show people through. If you've got somebody, a particular potential purchaser or someone with a potential use for it, could you not simply accompany them in? It's not like Sammy's that had an asbestos issue where you couldn't go in. That's not the case with this building, is it?
I think Ms Nielsen said, Councillor, that if we get to the point where council want us to, and we get community support to sell, then we would show potential buyers through.
Yes, I heard that, and I was a wee bit concerned to hear that, because it presupposes that it's going to be sold before you're going to show anybody through.
No, sorry, Councillor. We said it would be dependent on the council's decision, and if you go to 9-year plan consultation, what the community say and how the council respond to that.
Councillor.
The Fortune ran at the theatre for 42 years. What since then has changed in terms of seismic requirements or any other requirements that would mean you couldn't really use the building again for that similar purpose?
And Mark, please correct me if I get this wrong. You know some of the rules better than I do. Where it's at the moment, if you were to undertake significant works at the property, you'd need a building consent. In order to get building consent, you need to bring some of those fire and safety regulations up to code. That's one of the things that would change how you'd address the property as such. I can't really talk to the Fortune Theatre at all. I don't know anything about it. Or
Sorry, my question was, what has changed in the code since the Fortune Theatre was there? Because they were able to operate for a long time there, and I'm wondering what code change or what seismic requirements have changed since the Fortune were there that make it much more difficult now.
I can take that one if you want, Councillor. So as Ms Nielsen's alluded to, if you put in a building consent now for that building, the provisions of the Building Act of Section 112 would kick in, which is around the fire provisions and also the accessibility provisions. At some point, my guess would be, and I think Councillor Gilbert alluded to this before, around there will be an assessment request that will come through from the regulatory arm of council asking for a seismic assessment on that building. At this stage, I haven't seen that. I'm not sure. From what I've heard, we've done one at this stage, and depending on that, what will come out of that is that it may or may not be earthquake prone, which then obviously if it is, there are timeframes to facilitate those seismic upgrades, or you just leave it for a period of time with a big sticker on there that says this is an earthquake prone building.
I'm still waiting to hear an answer on what has changed in terms of the fire, access and seismic code rules. What has come down from government that allowed Fortune to operate there previously but wouldn't now? Have the regulations tightened up? I understand what you're saying about requiring a building consent if you want to do any major alterations, but if, let's just suppose you don't want to do any alterations, you just want to go in there, what has changed in terms of actual building regulations?
So nothing has changed since the last upgrade of the Building Act in 2008, which effectively says, again, the provisions of Section 112. So if you were just operating it as it was, with no building consent, you could continue operating it at that point in time. As soon as you put in a building consent, that does trigger the provisions of the fire and the accessibility questions. The earthquake provisions were brought in 2017, and that's the systematic assessment of buildings across the city. But at this stage, that has not been impacted on because we've not done the assessment.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Some of the criticism that people have said around the Fortune and Council is that council didn't perhaps do enough upkeep on the building. Do you think that's fair, that criticism?
I think what we can say is in recent years we've had dehumidifiers in there, and the property team have stabilised the building. A building that had a long history of issues with relating to keeping it dry and damp out.
Thank you. If the public come back with feedback that they prefer to say sell, is the option probably to look at as is? Selling it as is, yeah.
Yes.
Councillor O'Malley.
Not really needing that, thanks.
Councillor Eklund.
Thank you. So whether it's sold or whether we hold on to it, depending on how the consultation goes, there's no way that any owner of it at any time can demolish it, is there?
So the building's protected under the district plan. Demolition would be a non-complying activity, so a resource consent could be submitted for that application, and it would need to be determined by council. It is a Category 1 historic place with Heritage New Zealand Pohiti Tonga, and they would be an affected party to that resource consent. So there is potential for it to be demolished if an application was made for that.
Right, just to follow on that, the reason I'm asking that question is because, given the state of the building and the cost that would be involved to bring it up to standard for whatever it could be used for, could be prohibitive. It could be just far too expensive, keeping the facade or the building as it is. And so, again, just for clarity, if it wasn't practical or cost effective to do those things to make it usable, there could be application made and it could be demolished. So is that the case?
Yes, a building owner could make an application. I don't want to determine the outcome of that because it would need to be decided by council, and Heritage New Zealand Pohiti Tonga would be an affected party to that and provide input to a resource consent of that nature.
Yes. I'd like to just clarify this just a little, because Heritage New Zealand are involved because of the district plan rules. There would be a high degree of interrogation of any application to do anything to the exterior of the building. And so this has, the building has the highest protection available to the fabric of a building, is that right?
Yeah, so it is scheduled. A non-compliant activity resource consent would be a fairly onerous resource consent, and with it being a listed place with Heritage New Zealand Pohiti Tonga, there would be that additional layer with them being an affected party approval. It may be that the consent is notified, which would be potentially likely for a non-complying activity. So it would be an onerous resource consent.
Councillor Walker.
What a windbag I am. I do have two questions, but I want to just lead on from Councillor's question. Thanks, Lynn. Because we have this this saying that I only discovered when I moved to this country called demolition by neglect, which we've talked about around this table, and I don't think it's unfair of the public to perhaps ask questions related to this. So, firstly, what are your thoughts on that? And secondly, as part of a sale process as the owners, are we allowed to put a caveat of some sort within the sale process that in essence can be a way of filtering out known or potential purchasers who would go down that potential road, of which at the moment we don't seem to have any defence?
So, sorry, I'm just remembering the first part of your question, which was around demolition by neglect, which is, just to reassure you, that's not what's happening here. The interior of the building has had moisture damage and it's caused us some problems. We have gone in and got that under control. It is absolutely dry in there at the moment. A number of you have been through the property and you know yourselves it doesn't smell musty or damp anymore. it may still have moisture problems in the future, which is why we've got dehumidifiers and sensors in there to ensure that the conditions don't change and we don't risk that neglect of the property. Going forward into a potential sale process, Council could direct staff in any number of ways of how we wish to seek a potential purchaser or what we'd like to see the property used for. The other thing we could consider doing is putting a covenant on the property.
Thank you, that's helpful. And going back to my original question around and focusing back, Madam Chair, to the two decisions we're going to make today, and the second one around us seeking feedback through the 9-year plan process. Have we got any idea what sort of, I mean, what's the modus operandi of that? What are we seeking, apart from generic feedback?
I guess we're seeking feedback on two parts. On one, to remove it from Council's strategic owned assets list, and two, on the potential sale. I'm not sure just yet how we'd frame that up.
Quite sure. And I'm going to go back to a question Councillor Houlihan, sorry if I'm pointing at you with a thumb, that's very rude, asked and you didn't want to answer. So I'm going to read out just something from, I mean, all of us know people in the creative community, and I certainly know people who were involved with the Fortune Company who were based in the Trinity Church. And their comment to me over the weekend, and I just want to yes or no whether this reflects the current state of the building. Their comment was, and I won't reveal who it is, they said, but it was an appalling, unsafe, unhealthy and inaccessible building. Does that pretty much sum up? If you're reluctant to answer, that's fine.
I don't know that we can easily answer that. I mean, we can definitely say it was inaccessible for some people and members of our community, and we know that it had its challenges.
Yeah, just when we're getting that sort of feedback, I think it sort of speaks to the sentiment amongst the group using it.
Councillor Mayhem.
Yes, following on from what Councillor Walker was mentioning, I've seen some criticism from previous practitioners around moisture, and you just spoke to that there's no smell of dampness or mustiness, and we've got dehumidifiers running. You mentioned sensors, and I wondered if the moisture had been measured with a tool, Mr. Henderson. What's it called? A
moisture meter.
Moisture meter.
No, we've not had an internal moisture measure taken of the wall. What are the sensors for? They measure moisture in the air. Humidity.
What did the sensors say right now?
We're all good.
Councillor Benson Pope.
A further question about the hearing process. I think just to continue what the Chief Executive said, I think the community should be clear that should there be an application made by our future owner or anyone, because of the status of the current protection, the hearing panel, which would be appointed by our chairman, would be a fully public process anyway. So it's just that a couple of times staff have referred to council, where in fact it would be a council hearing panel that would make any decision in relation to a hearing. So it's got a further level of public scrutiny should things go that way. That was all.
Correct. Yes, correct. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, one of the many challenges, and Mr. West has alluded to this, was accessibility when the theatre company was up and running. And so I've got a nod there. And the mould issue was ongoing, was it not? And our team from DCC were actively involved in trying to manage that, but is it not the case that because there's no occupants, you can actually address that much more easily?
Yes, the last part, with it not occupied, was relatively straightforward to address in the end. But we did end up fixing a major repair on the roof, which had water tracking right down and through the building.
So it's not a case of council not having been active in maintaining it as the building owner, it's that it's been easier to do that maintenance because there isn't an occupant.
I'm sorry, I can't comment on the maintenance arrangement prior when it was the Fortune. I wasn't here, and I don't know what the arrangements were between the parties and who was responsible for what. Or
I can, and it was.
Councillor Ackling.
Thank you again. Just getting back to this demolition by neglect, which obviously that is a huge problem with certain buildings around the town. At the moment, the building is not deteriorating any further. It's not falling down or whatever, but it's costing $122,000 a year to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's been 6 years, so okay, obviously costs have gone up more recently, but you could say there's 600 odd thousand that's been spent to maintain the condition of the building now, to do nothing and to have no income. And so I just sort of wonder what other building owner would want to have a building that has no revenue and cost $122,000 a year. And so my concern with this, and I suppose my question is, how do we protect the building from demolition by neglect if it's not in our ownership, and whilst it's in our ownership, it's costing us a lot of money?
I think Mr Maudsley's answered that to a previous question around the covenants that we could potentially put it on it and other options for council.
I accept that, but what I'm saying though is that putting further restrictions, I suppose, for any new owner on it, doesn't that then make it even less appealing than what it is now?
Firstly, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's not appealing. I think there's a wide range of uses and the zoning allows for that, but we could protect the building's use or lack of use as it might be through a covenant. We could prevent people from sitting on it empty for years through a covenant. I'd have to look into the legality and how we'd frame that up, but I think we do have some options there.
Councillor O'Malley.
It's actually back to how the Fortune ended up on that list in the first place, because I have a feeling, if I'm right, am I right in recollecting that we were trying to work out how to get all the strategic assets bundled into a set of properties, because we were dealing with people who had vested stuff to us over the years. We were even having trouble finding out what the property was vested anymore, and this was somewhat an aggregation activity, and I thought it was, am I correct in recalling that it was Wall Street and the Fortune Theatre that got put together or something like that?
No. So no, that you're talking about endowment properties, and this and the Fortune wasn't ever an endowment property.
This is from a different, so it's on this list for the purpose of, or how did it get on the list?
Predates anyone that we can find around the table who knows.
Well, I mean, that's the decision we're reversing, so it'd be nice to know what the decision was. I assume it was because it housed the Fortune Theatre at the time, right?
I think it was for the building itself and for the function that was happening in the building, and there was a bit of confusion around many of the things that have been on that list.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to something Councillor Ackland said and just put a positive spin on this. There's absolutely no reason, depending on what we decide ultimately to do based on the feedback through a potential 9-year plan consultation, that a bunch or an individual or a bunch of people with wonderfully creative ideas with a vested interest in retaining the value of heritage in this city don't come forward with a plan that not only makes best use of the building but makes those investors lots of money ultimately. Lots of nodding.
There's so many ideas that could come to the forefront, but we just don't know. We haven't explored that as a council. And look, one of those could be a theatre. There could be a group that comes in and says, we'd like to make it a theatre.
Are there any more questions, councillors? No? Thank you all for answering all our many questions. I think that was very informative and very helpful. Okay, do we have anyone who would like to move the resolution? I'm happy to move that council agrees that we will seek feedback on the removal of the property at 231 Stewart Street from Schedule 2 of the Significance and Engagement Policy as part of the 9-year plan 25-34 consultation process, and agree that council will seek feedback on a proposal to sell the property at 231 Stewart Street as part of the 9-year plan 25-34 consultation process. Second to Councillor Weatherall. I think, as has been discussed, I think that there are plenty of building owners we have in our city who have taken ownership of some amazing heritage buildings and have done some fantastic change of use or restoration of it. And every day when I drive past the building, I think how wonderful it would be if somebody could take over the ownership of it. And I think as staff have done a wonderful job in ensuring that it is dry and it is well maintained, but it is costing us a significant amount of money, and council is not in position to be able to afford to restore it to its former glory. And I just would love somebody else to have that opportunity, and I think this is the first part of a long process, and I would look forward to hearing that our community's feedback during the 9-year plan on whether they think that that is the right decision. But I just think, yes, that we can't afford to just own it indefinitely with no future use of it, and we need to make a start on that. Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The way I see it is the DCC basically stumbled across owning this building to try and help the Fortune Theatre stay in business. Of course, the building in question deserves its heritage status, which is no way challenged if we remove it from Schedule 2 in the policy. Our city is fortunate to have a number of skilled developers who I'm sure would queue for the opportunity to put new life into this stunning building. Excuse the pun, but we need to stop the rot and sell this property to give the property the love it deserves. Since the closure of the theatre in 2018, it's cost the city around $750,000 to sit idle, with ongoing expenses of around $125,000 per year. I believe we have to get the use of this building as a future theatre out of our brain. It was a theatre that went broke and has since been stripped of all its assets to stop the building crumbling further beyond repair. Today is the day for the former Fortune Theatre building, which in my view is a financial liability for the city. And I sincerely hope we don't stop there, as council has many other similar buildings that we need to address also. Councillors have had the tour. We know firsthand the situation, and I hope we are all on the same page regarding the facts supplied in this report. I will be voting in support of option 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As a theatre person who has a theatre degree, it is a sad day for arts in the city. However, this site, the former Fortune Theatre building, has not been a working theatre for many years. And as a result of that, yes, there have been professional theatre practitioners who have left our city because that did create work for them. Theatre shows were able to come to the theatre, and they had work as professional theatres because it was the only professional theatre in our city. However, this might be controversial to say, but walls do not make a creative space. We have found our theatre community and our creative community has been really innovative in the way that they've found spaces around our city to perform, to share their voices, to share their art, and that's not going to stop. We're a city of artists, we're a city of firsts. In so many different ways, we're innovative, we're fighters, and we're not going to let this sit down and stop us. We have $17 million in the budget for a theatre. What we need to do is get on and get it done. build the theatre for professional theatre practitioners now. We need a vote as soon as possible to use that money for a professional theatre. And, you know, for those who are still pining for the old building of the Fortune Theatre, I'm sorry that, you know, this has happened. However, it's an old building. There's now an opportunity for someone who has, you know, skills in doing up heritage buildings to do it up. It's in a prime location and to do something wonderful with it. There's still the opportunity someone might put a theatre in it. That's, you know, not a definite no there. However, the access to that building is terrible. The layout was always really average, not good at all, with the toilets down the bottom of the building and the seats up the top. So it was never a great building inside. It might have looked good, but access was a nightmare. So let's move forward now and look forward to some new opportunities for theatre practitioners.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for the direction at the beginning about focusing on the building. And I know it's quite easy to slip over into professional theatre conversation, and I have lots to say on that, but that's probably for another day. In terms of the building, I mean, quite rightly, Dunedin is nostalgic about this, the Trinity Church. It's a stunner. I mean, it's an absolute stunner. It's up there with some of the best buildings in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a cracker, and I remember it fondly when I moved here 22 years ago, and I've experienced a lot of shows in there of differing quality, actually, some of which have blown me away, some of which I've fallen asleep to. But it has always been a bit of a dog, I think, in terms of a place for theatre, and that's the reason. I mentioned the commentary earlier, and when I'm hearing consistently from those people who are respected throughout Aotearoa in the professional theatre space, that the space in which that company was housed was appalling, unsafe, unhealthy, and an inaccessible building. I think that's an issue. But above and beyond that, I support this because that building, it needs to have life breathed back into it. It's a crying shame that every day we pass it and it's sitting there doing nothing. It should be a breathing, central part of the city's landscape. And I hope, as always seems to be the case when we go out to the public, there's always somebody or a group of people out there who are thinking about something that we don't even consider. And ultimately, we've heard it may become a theatre again. I have my doubts on that one, but I really hope that in the not too distant future, that I, for one, am able to walk through the doors and access that space as a revived, vibrant, beating heart of the city. Thanks. Support this.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. It's long been said that there are going to be some tough and emotional and difficult discussions and decisions and things to make, and for many this is going to be just one of those. Personally, I absolutely agree. I love the building. It is a wonder to look at. I've got some very fond memories of being in there. I've also got some memories I'd rather not have, but my point, we have to look at it differently. We have to focus on being financially sensible. Is it financially appropriate, for example, to own and support something, as has been mentioned, with no use for it, no use for insight for it, if we have it? And I agree that there are likely to be many people out there or groups out there for whom this is a very attractive building an opportunity, that they're jumping at the bit, waiting for the ability to take advantage of. If I had the money, absolutely, I love the idea of putting a cafe or some form of hospitality business in there. I can think of several around the country in similar buildings that have just breathed life into it, and it's full of noise and people every day. So I'm in full support of this. Whilst reluctantly, because I like the idea of making sure that we protect it, making sure that its heritage status is it can in no way be damaged or lost. But I'm confident that a covenant in place will do just that. But we have to be financially sensible and financially appropriate, as well as making sure that the building gets the life it deserves, as has been mentioned.
Councillor Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing I want to say is thanks very much to staff for all their answers, because there were a lot of questions with this one, and it's helped me very much so understand just what position we're in and what sort of position, to be honest, professional theatres in. And I very much also thank the Public Forum submitter for bringing to our attention just one idea, $500,000 and back in business, and we can use it sort of 200 shows a year. It doesn't look as though that stacks up, and at the moment we're not really here to discuss that specifically, but it does seem that first up, yes, we do need to address that, and to have something even short to medium term that was not perhaps a permanent fix for professional theatre is still a great thing, but it looks like that this is not potentially the location for that. What we're voting on here really to start with is seeing what the public have got to say. So this is all about consultation, this is all about seeing what residents think we should be doing with a building like this. It is definitely, as Councillor Weatherall said, of great concern that we've spent nearly $750,000 over the last 6 years just to keep the building such that it doesn't fall down or get worse in terms of state of repair. But perhaps the time has come to be quite serious about just what are we going to do with this building and how we're going to go about it. And a lot of that remains to be seen. And I'm certainly not going to predetermine what the outcome should be, because we have to hear from the community first. So that's all I've got to say, and I'll be supporting both A and B. Thank you.
Councillor Van der Vis.
I've worked for decades in the Fortune Theatre building, supplying lighting and sound systems mainly, and so have a very good detailed working idea of what it's good for. I recognise that the small theatre downstairs was an issue, but it was something which was kind of managed. In terms of the main theatre space itself, the claims that it's unsafe, unhealthy, and the access is terrible, in my experience, are all completely untrue. It's not, it certainly wasn't unsafe when I was working there. The ongoing big leak in the roof that caused a lot of the problems has been dealt with. In terms of wheelchair access, it's true that the main entrance didn't allow wheelchair access because there's 3 or 4 stairs going up to it, but the access that we used to get gear onto the stage was a level run-in from the pavement, and we were able to get wheelchair access through there and did do that quite successfully for many years. So the idea that access is terrible, I think, is just completely incorrect. The health and safety banner, which we find being waved every time somebody wants to get rid of something, again, I don't think is appropriate. I think it is shameful that it's taken 6 years for this paper to come to us, but that's our fault. As a council, we should have acted on doing something with the theatre way before now. And I think it's also really unfortunate that there's this idea about that we can guarantee its safety. I think 2 or 3 councillors have said because it has, and to quote the Chief Executive, the building has the highest protection available, Category 1 heritage site. I fought long and hard to get a Category Heritage 1 site for Carisbrook, and look what happened to that. So we have a situation here where we need to have a use for the Fortune Theatre. And for me, the question is, what ownership has the best chance of getting a use for that building? Is it DCC or is it private? And I don't think it's private. I've spoken with
Lund Construction, for instance, who have done a number of developments around the city, about the possibility of doing something with the building. It's not really suitable for putting apartments into because you're not going to be able to get enough light into them. It's going to be very expensive in terms of there's no car parking, no access, that kind of thing. The idea that it's incredibly attractive for redevelopment, I don't think is the case. And then it comes down to the idea that, well, we just can't keep owning this thing because it costs us. Well, it certainly costs us, and it costs us especially since we have essentially ensured that there's no one using the building. But isn't it the same for all of our community halls? We own community halls all over the city, and they all cost us. And we justify it because they get some community use. I think what we need to do is we need to seriously consider that having a slimmed down management theatre in this building would probably be the best use for it, and a use that would maintain it and maintain what is arguably one of the most the most valuable bits of heritage building that we have in the city. It was designed by R.A. Lawson, the same guy that designed First Church, and designed at Tugger Boys and a number of other of our absolutely iconic buildings. And if we are to wash our hands of the ownership of this building, we have no way of guaranteeing that it won't be demolished. We have no way of guaranteeing that a subsequent owner, if it gets flicked on, and these things quite often do, won't be under any kind of covenants or whatever that we might try and put on. Covenants are only as good as goodwill on both sides, and we've seen many examples where that hasn't happened. I'm thinking of the Century Theatre in Princes Street. That was also, you had to maintain the facade, and what happened to that? It's been a car park ever since. If we agree here today to say essentially this is the first step in us wanting to lose ownership of this building, I think that we run a grave risk, A, of losing the building, and B, of losing the opportunity of having a slimmed down, affordable theatre use for the building. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Vandervis. I was going to talk about how the building was very strongly protected, and now I consider the fact that Council just won an award a few days ago for their Dunedin Railway Station Restoration Wins National Awards, and Council are a good owner of heritage buildings. We also have the town hall that we need to do up. So I think this is definitely food for thought. I think the great thing about agreeing to do that, to move these to A and B, is that we're actually going to go out to public consultation, and I think it's the public who will be able to help us weigh up the decision making around this building. I think it's got good protection. However, I totally take on board Councillor Vandervis's about who is the best owners, and I think one of the challenges is we've kind of sat here for 6 years and not done anything with the building and not discussed it before. So this is a really good opportunity to discuss it, and also a good opportunity to go out to public consultation on what we think might be a way forward. And I think that the public will certainly, as evidence today, come up with some good ideas that we can then consider, and then also consider any financial implications that might come from it as well. So I will support the motion for the sake of public consultation and marvellous ideas.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've heard that the building is well protected under the district plan, and it has a Category 1 heritage building status. We've also heard that the moisture is gone out of the building now, and we have sensors and dehumidifiers to make sure moisture there. In item 16, it states that there have been changes to the Building Act legislation, Fire Provisions and Earthquake Prone Buildings Amendment Act of 2016. We've also heard that the building has its warrant of fitness and that the emergency warning systems are compliant. I disagree with Councillor Vandervis. I think there's some differing opinions around the table. It's not that it's not attractive. I disagree with the community hall model that you expressed as well. And you said it was accessible and then not attractive, and then you said it was accessible and attractive. So I'm not sure. You've explained there is an option of accessibility via the loading in space. I think probably in the 1870s we didn't think about accessibility. Maybe it'll be suitable as a church again. It just takes some imagination. It's not up to us to decide. What we're deciding on right now is public consultation, and then maybe a vision will emerge. I agree with Councillor Gilbert. It's a fantastic location. It's an iconic and gorgeous building. All we need is imagination. The DCC's kept it in a holding state since it was vacated. All of those urgent repairs have been done, and I thank the property staff for ensuring that the building has been safeguarded, and now it's up to someone who loves heritage buildings to have a vision. Maybe it's a home, accommodation, hospo, a venue, a practice space, I've heard Councillor Vandervis suggest. I'm not going to talk about professional theatre, but if I was going to, I'd say that we need new, fit-for-purpose, flexible, accessible space for our practitioners. Maybe we've been bad owners, but losing a building could mean gaining a functional and used space for everybody to enjoy. So let's see what comes of the consultation. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we have somewhat conflated a little bit about the loss of the Fortune Theatre and this building a little bit, and I certainly lamented the loss of the Fortune at the time. But it was operating on a significant subsidy from Creative New Zealand and the council at the time. So to bring those, to be able to operate without those subsidies would be an incredible level of efficiency brought back, which seems unlikely. In terms of the value of the building itself, well, that will be determined if the public consultation says, yes, let's put it on the market, and I think that only then we'll be able to tell whether or not buyers would conceive it of have value or not. But the alternative appears to be own a building that we won't let anybody go into until we've done a substantial amount of work to it. So there the community hall analogy does fail, because they are open to the public and used all the time. And if this was open to the public and used all the time, we'd be looking at it through a different lens again. But at the moment we're caught in a quandary, and I think this is not the only one. I think it can extend to Sammy's as well, where we have limited access to the building for anybody who's interested, unless they declare that they want to potentially interested to buy it. So we are not allowing at the moment access to groups that want to go in and reconnoitre. And I think we need to bring that back, and we have to work out a mechanism for both those buildings in which people of interest can enter safely. Because in both cases, the actual danger of the building didn't change until our perception of it changed. It was just as dangerous or just as safe when there were plays going on inside that building. Probably got a little bit black mouldy in between, but didn't get that much more dangerous. The reality of it is our perception and knowledge of its danger now puts us into a regulatory environment that makes allowing people to enter difficult. But we can end up with all these buildings all over town that we can't get into anymore after we were using them once we realised that there was a danger component. So that's going to have to get resolved at some point or another. Probably as an outcome of what this public consultation directs us to do. But we can't have a situation where we close a building up, we make it safe, and then we don't have a mechanism to get it active again. Yeah.
Councillor Gehring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify some facts, because people's memories are a little blurred in various areas. So the first thing is that today we're discussing the building 231 Stewart Street, and I thank the staff for being really clear about that in their description. All I'll say around the Fortune Theatre Company is that it closed because of an unsustainable business model. But I will also say that the building itself was extremely challenging, and two of those issues, not all, were black mould and access. I want to put on record that my thanks to staff, and particularly Ms Sleeman, who's sitting over there, for the work she did at the time of the closure. And ongoing from there on, and your team, Ms Nielsen. And as I asked and clarified in my questions, so much easier to address some of those issues when you have a vacant building that were always there but unable to be addressed in quite the way we have been able to. As for it lying idle, I would not characterise it quite in that way. So there was a little thing called COVID, and also the performing arts discussion, where we have delayed our decisions as a council for all sorts of reasons at various points, and we still haven't made a decision. We had the charcoal blue reports in several stages, and so that is what was happening in the background. And this building was considered in that shortlisting of buildings in terms of venues, potential reuse of venues. So let's be really clear about all those things. Having said all of that, and I don't disagree with Councillor Houlihan around creatives being innovative, and there has been burgeoning professional theatre in various areas, but we're not here to talk about professional theatre today, and in not doing so, I'm not supportive. Not supportive. In terms of the building, what an amazing location, what amazing character. We've heard about the protections it has and the possibility of a covenant. And I see this as the time has come. If we tried to do this within the first few years after the theatre company closed, it would have been too raw, I believe. But 6 years on, where we've looked at it as a possible theatre venue from our point of view in terms of the wider holistic ecosystem, we've done all of that work, and now the time has come to say, what do we do with it now? And I think this is an opportunity, and this motion allows that opportunity. And it will be part of a process. I'm excited to see where this lands in terms of what use this building may have, because it's a beautiful building. And thank you to staff for the opportunity to tour the building. If anyone was in any doubt about the challenges inside that building, you couldn't have come away with a clearer picture. So I thank you for that. And I'm just disappointed that not all councillors were able to go on that tour, because it was very clear. So thank you to staff for bringing this report to us. Its time has come. I'm happy to support it. Let's see where it takes us.
Are there any further speakers to the motion? If not, I'll exercise my right of reply and just briefly, yes, we're here to talk about 231 Stewart Street. We're not here to talk about professional theatre, and that's a time and place at a future date that we will have that opportunity to discuss that at length, I'm sure. And I actually disagree with a comment of yours, Councillor Vandervis. This is not being put on the agenda today due to health and safety. This is put on our agenda because staff have assessed that we're holding the building and that nothing's happened in the last 6 years, and should there be a better owner. And I hear Councillor Barker...
Point of order. You've misquoted me. I never said that it was put on the agenda because of health and safety. 25.2 misrepresentation.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes. Second to Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Wiley, you'll have to And hand over to the Chief Executive.
Just for procedural clarity, councillors, just so you're aware, because the point of order is against the... So we chose him to do that as the, because we had to choose someone.
I will not uphold that point of order.
Thank you. I'll continue on. Councillor Barker said who was the best owners and suggested that council was the best owners, and if we weren't in fiscally constrained times, possibly we would be the best long-term owners. But when we have to make priorities over our budget, and for 6 years we haven't had money to be able to prioritise the Fortune Theatre, and I think looking forward, what we know is coming up for the 9-year plan, I can't see it fitting in the next 9 years. So if we're thinking we're going to hold it for 15 years, I think that we need to be quite clear when we go out to consultation that at the moment there is no budget allowance to do anything on that building. I do think there is exciting, as Councillor Mayhem said, about the variety of potential uses that could possibly come, and I am too excited, as you say, Councillor Gary, is about what options may come. And I just think, as I said at the beginning, we have already a renowned community of building owners who have restored heritage buildings in the city to wonderful reuses, and I would love to see that happen again. So with that, I would like to put the motion.
By division, please.
By division.
Sorry, I just lost my spot. Councillor Ackland.
Aye.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Aye.
Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Councillor Gilbert.
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan.
Aye.
Councillor Mayhem.
Aye.
Councillor O'Malley.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Aye.
Councillor Weatherall.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Aye.
Carried 12-1.
Thank you. Now I'm mindful we've got a long day, councillors, and I might suggest that we adjourn now. We'll move into non-public and adjourn for lunch to resume back in non-public at 1 o'clock. Senator Councillor Walker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. I therefore adjourn the meeting till 1 o'clock. As reasons outlined in the order paper.